was not until the 1980s that anyone embarked on the monumental task of televising every single one of Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories. The series starred Jeremy Brett as the great detective. The ITV series of Sherlock Holmes was a huge success, and all of the most acclaimed actors of that generation queued up to take part. John Thor, Eric Porter, Cheryl Campbell, Michael Jaston, Peter Vaughan. And there were some actors who started a distinguished career in Sherlock Holmes, like Jude Law. Robert Hardy secured the plum role of the villain in a feature-length special called The Master Blackmailer.
One of the things that I remember latching onto in The Master Blackmailer was that he had sort of ideas above his stage. He was a terrible snob, a really odious snob. And I think what I did I drop my G's or something like that.
And yet here I find you, Mr. Holmes, a man of sense, boggling at terms, when the whole future and honour of your client is at stake. You surprise me, you do, really.
The death of the Master Blackmailer at the end is by the old Countess. It's a setup which Holmes knows all about. Does he stop her? No. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. He's his own lawyer, his own judge.
For a whole generation, Sherlock Holmes simply is Jeremy Brett.
I don't know what it was about Jeremy Brett, but I fell in love with him immediately and unconditionally and have never reviewed it.
For me, Jeremy Brett was Sherlock Holmes. When I go back and reread a story, I now picture Jeremy Brett.
I'm going to agree with everybody else. It has to be Jeremy Brett.
What he gets superbly well is the sheer weirdness and oddness of Holmes, that Holmes in the stories is a person very, very different and eccentric and strange and neurotic, and Brett captures that far better than any other actor that I've ever seen.
Now, gentlemen, if you would give me your undivided attention.
You know, he almost seems a kind of vampiric figure. Sometimes he's so cadaverous and he's so white, and you know, he has that slick back hair.
You all right, old man?
A witness to Jeremy Brett's extraordinary technique was the man who played Dr. Watson alongside him for so long.
I always think Jeremy, for example, brought quite a few things to Sherlock Holmes that maybe Conan Doyle hadn't even thought of. He was able to bring a touch of Edwardian acting onto the small screen, which was right for the character, but an extraordinary feat to do, because he would do the most you know, the director would give him a note and he'd do some extraordinary gesture and you think, can't get away with it, and it would work.
I think what made him very particular as Holmes was a quality that he had anyway in himself, which was a very androgynous quality. It was not quite fish or fowl or whatever, but it was also very sexy.
Jeremy Brett was so very, very special as Sherlock Holmes. A very special human being, I think. So it was a beautiful marriage between who the man was, his acting skills, and this particular product.
I think one of the reasons that Jeremy was so absolutely wonderful as Holmes was because, rather like Holmes's author, he became obsessed with it.
Watson, what is the medical term for obsession?
I really felt he was Sherlock Holmes. I went to see him after he'd been in his two-man show as Sherlock Holmes in his dressing room, and I think he was opening a champagne bottle with a sword stick. He was still Sherlock Holmes. It was extraordinary.
The role of Sherlock Holmes does take people over. I've talked to people who worked at the Midland Hotel where he lived while he was making the Sherlock Holmes series, And they said, well, they used to kind of dread serving him, really, because they just get stuck with Sherlock Holmes for the evening and not be able to escape.
Tragically, Jeremy Brett died before all the stories could be dramatised. He's now part of the Holmesian legend. And the legend lives on, often in strange and unpredictable ways. And that is why, as we'll see in the next part, Sherlock has survived all attempts to destroy him.